happy to be here and talking with a group of people that are very special to me about a topic that's very special to me. Um, in this short talk, I'll talk for about 20 minutes. I'm going to teach you one of my favorite mindfulness practices that's been so incredibly helpful and powerful for me personally and in my work with others. It will hopefully help to demystify the concept of mindfulness so you can put it into action in your daily life. One of the things that stands out to me most vividly about my experience in late adolescence through my 20s and into my 30s was how much I lived at the mercy of my mind. I'd wake up one day feeling energetic and optimistic, attractive and alive, and then the next day I'd wake up feeling small and fearful, insecure and alone. Nothing had changed externally. It was all the product of my fickle mind. I struggled to fall asleep at night because as my head hit the pillow, my mind was off to the races. I felt like I had absolutely no agency or say in what was happening. In my 30s, as the MD began to worsen, I experienced some major depressions and an increased identification with a body that was failing me. Things were feeling more and more out of my control. I first became interested in mindfulness and Eastern philosophy in college, but it was an intellectual curiosity and not something I was really able to live and put into practice. It's only in the past decade, and I'm 45 now, that I started training formally, developing a regular meditation practice, and I recently completed a 2-year mindfulness and meditation teacher training with Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach, 2 leaders in the field. So even though today my body presents a lot more challenges than it did when I was in my 20s and 30s, I no longer live at the mercy of my mind. And for this reason, I'm happier and more peaceful today than ever, in spite of some hefty challenges. This is what I like to refer to as my street cred. What I'm talking about today is a lived experience, not a theory in a textbook. The art of training the mind is actually quite simple and straightforward in theory, yet it can be profoundly elusive in practice. One of the reasons that it's so elusive is that it involves a lot of deconditioning and unlearning. And this can feel very threatening to a mind that wants to assert control at all costs. If everyone with FSHD had the same emotional, psychological symptoms resulting from the shared physical challenges, there'd be little to talk about here. It would mean that having FSHD determined our well-being. The reality is that if you take 50 people with FSHD, you'll see a lot of overlapping physical symptoms and a much more expansive well-being profile. There are a lot of factors that contribute to well-being. I don't want to be reductionistic here and oversimplify things, but there's a powerful variable that sits at the heart of my message today. Circumstances, including illness, influence, but do not dictate our well-being. It's how we relate to our circumstances that matters most. Ariana Huffington said, "What study after study show is that meditation and mindfulness training profoundly affects every aspect of our lives, our bodies, minds, physical health, and our emotional and spiritual well-being. It's not quite the fountain of youth, but it's pretty close. When you consider all the benefits of meditation, and more are being found every day, it's not an exaggeration to call meditation a miracle drug." Mindfulness is experienced in the present moment, but most of us, for most of the time, are not operating in the present moment. Usually we're on autopilot, going through the motions, lost in our thoughts, busy thinking about the past or the future, acting and reacting. This means that we miss the present moment, the only moment we ever have to be alive, to make decisions, to grow, to heal, and to be there for the people we love. The untrained mind is a puppy, checking out every person that passes by, trying to eat everything it sees, constantly jumping here and there, distracted by everything it comes across. What do you do with a puppy when it behaves this way? Hopefully, you don't just let it run wild, nor do you beat it and scream at it when it gets distracted. Rather, you consistently, lovingly, and firmly bring it back to heel over and over again. Sharon Salzberg, another pioneer in bringing mindfulness meditation to the West, said, "It's never too late to turn on the light. Your ability to break an unhealthy habit or turn off an old tape doesn't depend on how long the tape's been running. A shift in perspective doesn't depend on how long you've held on to the old view. When you flip the switch in that attic, it doesn't matter whether it's been dark for 10 minutes, 10 years, or 10 decades. The light still illuminates the room and banishes the dark." She says, "The possibility of retraining your mind in a new way, so the old patterns of pushing away or holding on or being distracted or being ashamed, they can be challenged. They can be let go of into a whole new way of relating to our experience." And all of this has nothing to do with Buddhism per se. It has to do with being a human being and having a capacity to look deeper into our lives. It's a little story. Once there was a village at the banks of a big, strong river. One day, a villager saw a person crying for help being carried down the river. The villager, who was a strong swimmer, jumped in and pulled the drowning person ashore. Briefly afterward, another person was carried downstream, and then another, and another. The villager couldn't handle it all by himself, called his friends for help, and they all came and helped. They got really busy and exhausted by more and more people in high distress in the river, and then fighting for their lives to save others in the currents day after day. So the villagers invented a net that was cast across the river so it would catch people. They built shelters and clinics for the people whose lives they'd saved. But what are the villagers missing? They miss finding out why people are falling into the river upstream in the first place. Most of us have likely tried to fix our own downstream long enough. We live in a world of downstream fixes. Training the mind is about addressing what's happening upstream in our own lives. My favorite Buddhist teaching is the parable of the two arrows. The first arrow is what life slings at us. Things like illness, loss, pain, pandemics. These are things that are outside of our control. The second arrow is what we shoot at ourselves in response to the pain of the first arrow. It includes the clinging, aversion, anxieties, projections, and fears in response to the felt pain of the first arrow. Things like, when will it go away? I don't want to feel this way. Will it last forever? What have I done to deserve this? It's the second arrow that turns pain into suffering. It's the second arrow that creates an ongoing state out of an experience by injecting it with a narrative filled with thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. It's also the second arrow that we have control over. We cannot control how the DUX4 gene impacts our muscles. We do, however, have agency over how we relate to the loss of function, and even more importantly, how we relate to all the thoughts and feelings that arise in response to the loss. Most are probably familiar with the Serenity Prayer, Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So an obvious question then is, what can we do not to fire the second arrow? And it's important to emphasize here that the goal is not to never fire the second arrow. The goal is to cultivate a habitual awareness so that when we do start to fire the second arrow, we become aware that we're doing so, allowing us to turn back to the experience itself, creating the space and openness and compassion for it to run its natural course. When something happens that makes you feel sad or pain, there's an evolutionary mind-based response to get rid of the pain. No one likes to feel pain. Many people are afraid that if they allow themselves to feel the pain, whether it be physical or emotional, that it will be overwhelming and will never go away. The irony is that the opposite is true. When you keep pushing the pain away, it grows and pressure builds. It rents more and more space in your head and body, leaving less room for other things. Tara Brach says, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Mindfulness teacher Shinzen Young created a formula that I love. Suffering equals pain times resistance. So what happens in a formula if you have pain as a constant and there's zero resistance? 0 times any number, what happens to the suffering? So often when we suffer from chronic pain, we're really angry at the body because the body has betrayed us. The body's not doing what it's supposed to do, what we want it to do. And that includes not just pain, but having the FSHD and the losing of function and the weakness. The pain can become emblematic of a narrative that we create about failure and loss. So many deep-seated emotions connected to the experience of this pain. When we resist the pain by physical tensing, emotional reactivity, judgment, or avoidance, our identity becomes linked with it. We become the victim of the pain. Pain becomes the enemy. It's happening to us. Resisting turns unpleasantness into suffering. Awareness and attitude are the antidotes to suffering. I do not mean that they are the antidotes to pain. They are the antidotes to suffering, which is caused by resistance. By purposefully bringing a kind and mindful attention to pain and the resistance to pain, the identification that creates suffering is dissolved. We then become the witness and not the victim. Pain and suffering are not the same. Pain is an experience, a feeling, a response that can manifest itself in different ways, including in the body as physical pain and or emotionally as psychic pain. Pain is not the same as suffering, but pain often leads to suffering. So now I'm going to teach you a powerful tool to overcome the barriers to presence, to catch and break those second arrows, and to help you start to cultivate a mindfulness practice called R.A.I.N. R.A.I.N is an acronym used in the mindfulness community as a powerful tool for practicing mindfulness. I'm happy to provide a handout of this as well as a guided meditation to anyone who's interested. R stands for recognize. Recognize whatever is happening in the present moment. A stands for accept. There's nothing to do with whatever is happening other than naming it and accepting that this is what is happening right now. I stands for investigate with compassion, and N stands for nurturing. Then there's what to do after the R.A.I.N, how to integrate it all. So I'll take you through this process now, starting with the R of R.A.I.N, recognizing what is happening. The key to recognition and cultivating awareness is paying attention. Paying attention does not mean assigning value to what is happening or judging it. It's just about naming things as they happen. That's all you have to do. You don't have to fix it or change it. Just name it. When you find yourself lost in thought and you become aware of it, you say to yourself, thinking. The same goes for feeling. When you recognize you're feeling something, you can say to yourself, feeling, or you can say, sad, anxious, afraid. Awareness or recognizing is about stepping back and observing. The hidden power in this is that the more you do this, the more you are distancing yourself from identifying with your thoughts and feelings. When we identify with our thoughts and feelings by clinging to them or fighting them, we're inadvertently giving them much more power. We're putting a boulder in our own path. The more we feed the thoughts and feelings via identification, the bigger the boulder becomes. Observing clears the debris by allowing the thoughts and feelings to come and go naturally. The next thing to do after the R of recognizing and before the A of acceptance is to start practicing what's referred to as the sacred pause. Some of you might be familiar with the Viktor Frankl quote, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And it can be the briefest of pauses that creates room for growth and expansion. The pause between the action and the response allows us to ask ourselves, what's happening right now? Why am I getting so upset? Just asking those two questions before responding will provide enough time for the adrenaline to subside a bit and to respond from a different place. So once we recognize and pause, the next step is the A of R.A.I.N, to accept whatever is happening in the moment. Acceptance does not mean that you will not change. Change is the one thing that will happen no matter what you do, because nothing ever stays the same. Acceptance is simply about meeting whatever you're experiencing with an open heart. Some people like to say to themselves, I consent, or this too, or can I be with this? Your job is not to change anything or fix anything. Clinging to a positive experience or pushing away a negative experience doesn't help to make the positive experience last longer or the negative experience go away. The way the story goes, when Siddhartha sat under the Bodhi tree and meditated, on the night he was to become the Buddha, the god Mara slung arrows at him all night. Mara is essentially the god of shadow, and his arrows were manifestations of all the unawakened thoughts and emotions of Siddhartha's human experience. They included, among others, anger, lust, jealousy, shame, embarrassment, and self-doubt. With each arrow that cut through the air towards him, Siddhartha brought awareness and compassion to it. The arrows, when received by his compassionate awareness, turned into flowers and fell at his feet. By the time the morning arrived, there was a sea of flowers surrounding the awakened Buddha. But even after he became enlightened, the Buddha discovered that Mara would show up from time to time when he was teaching. He'd be teaching to a crowd and describe seeing Mara walk around in the back. His reaction to Mara remained this warm, compassionate awareness. Hello, Mara, I see you there. Let's have tea. Imagine responding that way anytime you have a difficult or challenging thought or emotion, inviting it for tea. It sounds kind of funny, but it's transformational when put into practice. This is a poem by Rumi called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So that's the R and the A of R.A.I.N, recognizing, then pausing, and accepting that this is what is happening right now. Moving on, there are 4 facets to the investigative process, the I of R.A.I.N. The first is the body. What are you experiencing in the moment in your body? And this is not an intellectual process. It's a gentle exploration. If you're feeling sad, can you locate the sadness in your body? Do you feel a tightness in your chest or throat, heaviness in your stomach? Your job is not to figure out what caused it. It's more gentle. It's just about locating it and connecting with how it's living inside you in the moment. Where are you feeling it? What does it feel like? The second are the feelings. What are you feeling in the moment? Can you categorize it as positive, negative, or neutral? And can you be with it as it is? The third are the thoughts. What are you thinking about in the moment? Can you be with them as they are? And the fourth has to do with the process that exists as a result of the experience in your body, your feelings, and your thoughts. Are there beliefs that you hold as a result of what you're experiencing? Are there narratives that you've created related to what you're experiencing? The final step in the R.A.I.N practice is nurturing. This is about asking yourself what you need, how to best take care of yourself, meeting your experiences with compassion and an open heart. You don't have to come up with an answer about what you need. It's the act of compassion that matters most. Saying to the vulnerable part of yourself, I see you. Finally, after the R.A.I.N, we can step back and examine our process. What does it mean to not identify with your experience? Non-identification is recognizing that you are not your thoughts or feelings. You can observe them, you can name them, you can accept them and understand them, but they do not define you. It's helpful to take stock of how you're feeling before you practice with R.A.I.N and then how you're feeling after. This will help you to see how everything is always changing. So if the concept of mindfulness has always felt kind of murky, I hope this helps a little to clarify what it's about and what you can do to put it into practice. Because you can practice this over and over and over again. It's a form of exercise. And again, it's about coming off of autopilot by cultivating a witness to our experiences. Again, I'm happy to send a handout for practicing R.A.I.N to June, who can share it with you, and a guided R.A.I.N meditation as well. And I really hope this was helpful. And it really is always special for me to do things like this with the FSHD community. And thank you to Beth and to June for the invitation. And if anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to hear them.
Thank you so much, David. That explained a lot of things about mindfulness practice that I didn't know about, so I appreciate that so much.
I'm glad.
So for everyone in the audience, this webinar is being recorded, and we will put up a blog post probably in about a week. And in the meantime, if David can send me those handouts, I will include those on the blog post. So just keep an eye out for that. So there are questions in the Q&A area, and I have one to start with. So you talked about suffering being pain multiplied by resistance to the pain. And I know that a lot of people with FSHD really try to overcome, the difficulties, the muscle weakness, the loss of function. They're very often very stubborn and ingenious about finding workarounds, trying to not let it prevent them from living fully and doing, So my question is how to distinguish between that kind of adaptive urge, to keep going, and resistance. When does, how do you know the difference?
Yeah.
you know
Um, I feel like it's, that thing about distinguishing between what do I have agency or control over and what don't I have agency or control over. Like if I'm experiencing muscle weakness uh, due to the FSHD, um, are there things that I can do to take care of myself, to take the best care of myself? Um, and that is being proactive. That's not being resistant. Um, but it's really when it's like, if you're feeling weakness and you just get stuck, which is, it happens with, I don't want to be feeling this way. What have I done to deserve this? Why me? You get stuck in then just resisting the the pain. And that doesn't help to motivate you. Most people, I don't think it helps to motivate taking action. I think it if anything, it contributes to feeling stuck and depressed. Um, so that's the difference to me. There's a big difference between being proactive and focusing on things that you actually have agency over versus getting stuck in um, wishing something wasn't happening that we have no control over.
Right. Thank you. That's helpful. We have a question, this, I think, ties into this from Ginny. She wants to know, how do you recommend dealing with frustration? I get frustrated a lot because of the FSHD and the inability to do things throughout the day.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there are so many moments of frustration that can arise because there are just so many things that are difficult or impossible to do. And that's the beauty of this practice, the R.A.I.N practice. It's so concrete. And I really encourage you to use that and practice with it. So the first thing is when you're feeling frustrated, is, do you recognize I'm feeling frustrated? So that's the R, recognizing, oh, I'm feeling frustrated right now. I want to, uh, I want to be able to go out and be with my friends, but um, I feel so exhausted that I just need to stay home. So you're already cultivating that awareness of what it is that you're experiencing and recognizing it, you're naming it. And then there's that A of accepting, this is what I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling, first of all, I'm feeling, the accepting is I'm feeling exhausted. There's an accepting of that. And there's an acceptance of the frustration, which is a bit of that resistance. Like, I don't want to feel exhausted right now. And then you can go into the I to saying, okay, where, am I feeling this in my body? Am I feeling a tightness in my chest? Am I feeling it in my stomach? And what I like to do when I do that is, if I'm feeling, for example, a tightness in my chest, is I put my hand on my chest and I close my eyes and I name it. Let's say, like frustration. Can I be with this? And that's not an intellectual question. It's really, can I make space for this? Can I allow myself to feel what I'm feeling? Instead of telling the crying baby to stop crying, can I pick up that baby and hold it? You're not trying to get rid of the vulnerability. You're making space for the vulnerability. And that is really magical if you keep doing it and practicing it. And there will be resistance to that practice. That's part of it. There'll be resistance saying, oh, this is not going to help, or what's the point, or that's par for the course. But I promise you that, first of all, this is something that you don't need muscles to practice. You don't need to be able to walk or run. You don't need money. You don't have to pay someone to do this. You can do this on your own, and taking 5 minutes of your time, multiple times a day to practice. And that's part of the beauty of it as well.
Great, thank you. We get some nice compliments on the chat room. Aura says, David, this is incredibly informative and helpful.
Thank you.
Um, Rick has an interesting question. He says, it seems like you were speaking a lot about, mindfulness is directed to yourself, to the self, and dealing with difficult emotions. Um, can this approach also be useful in interpersonal relationships?
Oh my God, yes, of course. Well, first of all, it's hard to really be present for someone else if you're not present for yourself. Um, so the more you practice this internally, the more that will impact your relationships. But yes, you can practice this. There's a really good book I'm just looking at my bookshelf. Um, I can let you know what the name of it is. It's about mindful communication by Oren Safer. Um, I can let you know the name of it, um, but this certainly, the more you practice this with yourself, the more you make space for your own experiences, the more you're going to be able to do that for others.
Great, thank you. Um, Emily asks, are there tips and tricks for getting out of thought ruts? How do you snap out of a mood to be able to go into the R.A.I.N technique?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really, I mean, I know the way, I sort of explain it all or talk about it, it seems very straightforward. And obviously, when we're feeling stuck in a thought rut or we're feeling bad, it can be really hard to kind of move into the R.A.I.N practice. And so maybe what you can do if you recognize, oh, I'm stuck, I'm in that thought rut, um, and if it's helpful to say, all right, I'm gonna, take a minute and do some breathing, or go into a different environment and sit outside, changing your location. Um, those are things that you can do, but it's going to take practice. This is not a perfect or a linear practice. There are going to be times when you recognize that you're thinking or you're stuck in a thought rut and you stay stuck in it. That's okay. That's part of the resistance. The resistance is not the enemy. If you can just see the resistance as just another feeling, it's just another, it's just another expression of the mind. It's not the enemy. So just work with it. Like, so just as you would name like thinking, and then if you keep thinking, like thinking, and then if you notice that there's a resistance to stop the thinking, you just name it resistance. And you just keep doing that until, and can you accept that this is what's happening right now, including the resistance?
Great. You, I think, likened the process of the practice of mindfulness as something that's ongoing. You don't just do it once and then you're like suddenly
Yeah.
a mindful, enlightened being. It's a probably a lifelong
Yes.
practice, much like physical exercise, right?
Right.
And sort of by analogy, of course, we can all do certain exercises at home at any time, but some of us, myself, I'm speaking about, won't. The only way we can exercise is if we get a trainer, a fitness trainer, or somebody to do it with us.
Yeah.
Is that also the case with mindfulness? Are there people who, or even group sessions that people can join to do, to bring mindfulness practice into their lives?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing is that it's become so popular. So there are apps now with online communities, apps like Headspace or Calm. I use the Waking Up app um, with guided meditations. Um, that's one thing you can do. You can do online classes, like there's something called mindfulness-based stress reduction, and that's something that was created by John Kabat-Zinn, and it was actually originally created for people with chronic pain. Um, and that's I believe it's an 8-week class. And the great thing, I mean, one of the sort of perks of having gone through COVID is that there's so much more available online now. Um, so if you're someone that needs accountability or does better with a group, um, there's so much out there. And do it. If you're someone that you can put a reminder in your phone to meditate or to practice R.A.I.N or check in with yourself, and that works for you, fine, then do that. Some people have accountability partners where it's like, okay, you just check in with each other and you talk about how it's going so that you don't feel alone with it.
Great. Here's a question. How to practice mindfulness and keep practicing when many things, small and big, are going on at the same time in your life, like your disease progression, family, emergencies, work pressures. Um, how do you keep practicing when life is coming at you full gale force?
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good question, and something I can relate to. I mean, I've got 2 kids, a full-time practice, dealing with. I have an extensive self-care routine, and it's a priority for me. Like I meditate every day. That's not something that's like just like I brush my teeth every day. I don't. question, do I have time to brush my teeth, or could I do this? And, you know, you don't have to meditate for an hour every day. Even if you can get into a habit of practicing for 5 minutes and experiment with what works for you so that it doesn't feel like a chore. Some people don't do well with sitting and in silent meditation. Some people do better with a guided meditation. Um, so finding what works for you is really important. Being understanding and compassionate with yourself. So if you get stuck or you get swept away and you don't practice for a week, we're human. It happens to all of us. You know, can you if you're punitive with yourself and judgmental, that's probably not going to help to motivate you to get back into the practice. Um, but doing it in a way that works for you, 2 minutes even, but trying to be consistent, because doing it like once in a while, you're probably not gonna see the benefits, because it really is like exercising. It's something that the more you do, and I can't tell you, I meditate for an hour every day, and I can't tell you how many meditations I'm like, oh my God, my mind was just all over the place. But I'm used to it now, and I know that, oh, that's my mind. That's the mind. Like that's what the mind does. It's not that we're supposed to just sit and meditate and have a blank mind. So part of it is also evaluating what our expectations are when we go into this.
Right. That's the act of recognition.
Yeah.
That, yeah. Um, Great. Very, very nice. I think one of the things I think about is I think our society, and maybe this pertains more for women, but for men too, is it's very hard to prioritize ourselves. We're supposed to prioritize everybody else, right? Um, so I think that's often why these sort of self-care kind of rituals take second place to other things that seem more urgent. But how do you deal with that?
Um, I mean, I recognize it. For me, it's I've seen how it's a lifeline for me. Like I need it. It's just something that I've integrated so much. It's so important to my day-to-day existence, and also how I function in my work with being able to be present with people. Like a couple weeks ago, I fell 3 minutes before a session. I was starting my day. It was 8:57. I fell and I was bleeding. Um, I had to get help up and like wiping off the blood. This is a pretty extreme example, but like I was able to sort of center myself and and start working. And I chose to do that. Like I didn't, my wife was like, why don't you text your person and tell them that you can't meet? I didn't want to. Like I didn't want to just go and lie down in my bed and feel sorry for myself. Um, I wanted to do this and I felt empowered by it. Like I felt like, we can be kind of badass with, this, and be like there's a lot of challenges that we have to deal with, um, that if we can confront and not just like bullishly or blindly push through. I was quite conscious of what I was doing when I did it. And I feel proud of myself for doing it. And I think I may have strayed from your question, but like in terms of like the priority of, you know, how to deal with not prioritizing it. Um, it's just, it's so important if we're going to be there for ourselves and for the people that we love.
Yeah, I think it's always a shifting thing, because maybe one way to think about it is that by prioritizing yourself, you're also prioritizing others, because you're going to be better able to be present for them. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes prioritizing the other is something that's of value to you. And in doing that, like you got up and went to see your, you know, your client.
Yeah.
So it's always a shifting thing.
Yeah.
And I guess learning to recognize how to navigate that
Yeah.
is probably key there.
Yeah.
Here's a comment from Bill. He says,
Mhm.
I've learned to own my emotions in illness or situations at hand. I learned this through counseling after my divorce. One exercise was to do affirmations. My problem is how to develop these affirmations. I know how to put them in practice, but have difficulty putting them in words. I've taken the attitude that if this is the worst that can happen to me and I've handled it, then I can deal with the next problem. So I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, how do you find words sometimes when you can't find them? Or how do you deal?
Well, even like I feel like Bill, you just actually put words to that. Like I can see making that an affirmation. Like I've I've dealt with X, Y, and Z and gotten through it and handled it, so I can deal with anything that comes my way. You know, I feel like if we can, really identify like what are what are the things that we've struggled with and what have we done to get through them, then it's just a matter of like, okay, how do I find the right words that feel right for me, that are meaningful for me, in terms of creating that affirmation.
So here's something from Anonymous, a little fan message. He says, great talk, thanks. Have you presented it on other channels and podcasts about self-improvement, like Science of Success? I think you would be great for this. I would agree.
Oh, thank you so much. I've done some interviews, and I um, I developed as part of this my meditation and mindfulness teacher training a 4-session course which I taught live, but I recorded. And one of my goals for this year is to edit the recordings of that and to make that available and available. One of the things I already had in mind, available for free for the FSHD community. Um, but thank you. And I mean, when moments do, I can't say, maybe it's my introverted nature that I don't seek sort of um, putting myself out there, but when it feels right, or when the moment arises, that I do it and it feels good.
Great. Well, we would love to know about it when you get those podcasts edited.
Yes,
We'll definitely
yeah, for sure.
share them to our community. So I think that's all the questions we have for today. So Beth, if I can invite you back to give some concluding remarks, and thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Was great, David. Thank you so much. I learned a ton and I was scribbling notes about as fast as I could possibly go. So thanks. um, so yeah, thank you again, everyone, for attending our FSHD University webinar today. And of course, thank you to Dr. David Younger and his lovely wife, Debbie, for allowing him to join us today. Our next FSHD webinar is on Thursday, April 15th. It's at our regular time of 1 p.m. Eastern. And our guest will be Dr. Angela Leck. She's a research scientist from Yale Medical School. And she's a FSHD researcher. So she's going to share her scientific journey. That's going to be really, really interesting. And as always, these webinars are scheduled for the third Thursday of every month from 1 to 2 Eastern. 2 events come also actually that tie into today's webinar that address mental well-being. On Tuesday, March the 30th at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, is our Caregiver Sharegiver Hour. And this hour is specifically designed for those who are providing care to loved ones with FSHD. And then our next monthly wellness hour is Monday, April 12th at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific. And again, these sessions are open to everyone. And they discuss a variety of topics, all related to mental well-being. So those are two really great events coming up that really tie into today's session. Also, our FSHD Society radio show and podcast featuring Tim Hollenbach is the second Tuesday of every month at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. Next month, April 13th, Tim's guest is going to be Rabbi Haviva Nur David. She's a longtime member of our community, of our FSHD community, and her first novel called Hope Valley is being published this month. So the radio show is on YouTube, so be sure to follow our YouTube channel so that you can get notified about these live stream events and any other updates that we upload. As a matter of fact, this video today will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for viewing later. And then, of course, as always, you can check our website events calendar for all upcoming events, including chapter events. Check your email inbox. June does a great job of every month sending out all of the upcoming events for the month. And thank you again, David, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we will see you next time. Take care, everyone, and stay safe and stay well.